job shop, we hang all kinds of different stuff. So typically we're going to use hooks, but we could also, if it's something super heavy that the hook isn't going to hold, then we could be using chain or eye bolts. So I've got some stuff laid out here. When you're hanging with hooks, a typical hook has a V at both ends. Some are like rounded in the shape of a C, but we typically use these so that way the part kind of rests down in the valley. This is obviously a really tiny hook and a small diameter, so this can't hold very much weight, because like if I could just pull on this and I can just bend it. So that's gonna be for really tiny light parts, and usually you're gonna be hanging those parts in a nest. So like you'd have a tiny part here, and then another hook right off of it, and another tiny part, and then we can hang it all the way down. So that's like a 2.5 inch hook and like a probably around a 16th diameter. This is just a little bit bigger diameter, and it's a 4-inch hook, so it'll hold a little bit more, but it's still pretty weak. So I can pull on it and then start to bend. So normally you can tell when a hook is not really strong enough if you're hanging from it, and this back is normally usually straight, but when that back starts to arch like that, that means you're pulling on it too hard and it has too much load. And the problem is you might hang it like that and it's fine and it's not falling, but then you go in the oven and this thing heats up and then it splays out even more and then it just rips out. So this is another 4-inch hook. This is 1/8 inch diameter, so this is a decent hook right here. Still can't hang super heavy stuff. This one it's strong enough that I can't pull on it and splay it out. And then this 4-inch hook is like 3/16 in diameter. So this is a pretty hardy hook. You're not really going to find much that this can't hang. It's just like a part that you're literally lifting by hand. Even if it's really heavy, this should be able to hang it. If you're hanging it with a forklift, then this may not be enough. Then this is just the same type of thing here, about the same diameter. This is just a longer hook, so that allows you to, you know, if you need to get the part lower so you can spray it or wash it, or if you're hanging multiple parts in a nest, like we call it, and you just need more gap between the parts, then you got longer hooks. This is our thickest diameter hook. I think that you can get them even thicker from some of the hook manufacturers, but this is a 1/4 inch diameter. This really will hold pretty much anything that you need it to. Again, if you're hanging it with a forklift, this may give out on you once it goes in the oven, but this is a pretty strong hook. So this one 12 inches long, this is 8 inches long, but as we go down in size here, usually when you get down to something that's not very tall of a hook, the diameter gets smaller. Usually you can't get a 1/4 inch diameter in something this tiny. If we're hanging it with a forklift, then hooks is not gonna be strong enough to hold it, and then we jump to chain. Sometimes you can just chain right through the part. There's a big enough hole, so you just chain it through, and then you use a clasp, so you're chaining around the cart and the part. The problem with that is even if there's a hole in the part, let's say at the bottom of my hand there's a hole, so you go through the part, but now the chain is actually laying against the side of the part. Instead of a hook mark, now you got like a whole line from the chain. So most of the time when we're using chain through a part, the hole isn't quite big enough that you can feed the chain through, but you could put eye bolts in. Lifting eye bolts like this are really expensive, so it is an investment. If you don't do a lot of big heavy parts, then there would be no need to have these, but that's the majority of what we do is really big heavy stuff. Obviously this eye bolt looks huge, so that's going to be for the heaviest parts. Then this is kind of a medium sized one. Then this is really tiny. So in this particular case, this really isn't going to hold a lot of load, but every once in a while we'll have parts that have threads in them. The hook doesn't quite sit on there right, or it gives a hook mark, so these are nice because you just screw into the threads. You have a nice place to hang from, even on a light part that can get rid of your hook mark because you're going right into the threads. When we're training the guys hanging, and then just basically throughout, anytime that I see them hanging heavy stuff, I always tell them, always grab the biggest eye bolt possible. So if you've got a huge 1-inch hole, you don't stick the 3/8 inch eye bolt in it and put washers on there so it doesn't pull through. You go with the biggest eye bolt you possibly can fit through the hole, because if the hole is that big, that means that at some point they're bolting it down with a really big bolt. This is a really big, heavy piece of equipment, so you better be using a really big eye bolt so it can hold the weight of the part. Just because you have an eye bolt and you think like, oh, that's gonna hold really good, and you're putting it in a huge hole, typically it's on a really, really heavy part, you could hang this, and then if you have like thread sticking out or something, like you could just bend the eye bolt. The part can be that heavy, especially if you, when you're going to hang, if you stick this in a part and then you tighten it down, and you hang it like this. So you have that thing straight out. Now you're putting this whole joint right here in bending, right? So there's actually, in engineering terms, you're putting a moment around this point right here. So if you use too small of an eye bolt and you load it like that, you could just, this ring could just snap right off. So you always want to load it like this, because now it's a lot stronger this way and it's not just going to snap off. Because like this you have a bending moment out here. So not only do you have the load of the part, you also have, in simple terms, you have leverage against this point. So it wants to bend that up. Here you don't, it doesn't really have any leverage against it, because the chain ends up laying like right up against, you don't have as long of like lever arm here. So typically we always try to hang like that, the chain just up through there, and then it holds really good. Obviously on the other end of this we'll screw a nut on so the eye bolt doesn't just fall out of the part. The basics when you're going to hang, a lot of it's common sense. You're not going to hang a super heavy part with a tiny hook like this, and then you're not going to have a really lightweight part that has no hole in it and then try to use an eye bolt. That doesn't make sense either. People with a lot of mechanical inclination and a lot of experience working with their hands and just kind of common sense around mechanical things, that's a lot easier for them. People that don't have a lot of hands-on experience with anything, then it's a struggle because they don't necessarily know which hook to grab. But we always say grab the biggest hook possible, as long as you're not leaving a hook mark behind. If you have a hole that's really large, then just get the biggest hook that you can, because then you're always on the safer side. You don't have to worry about the hook breaking. Reasons why we wouldn't always use a really big hook like this on a tiny part is maybe because we're just going to leave a really big hook mark on it. This is a bigger diameter hook. There's more material here, so when you set it on a part, there's a chance for it to lay across the part where it doesn't let you get powder on there. Versus something super, super tiny like this doesn't leave as big a hook mark. Common mistakes that we'll see is, for one, not a big enough hook. Someone hung parts and you see it splayed out like that. And then also hanging something that's like not even as heavy as a paperweight, and we use this, and like the part is laying across the hook, so there's a huge hook mark. You don't even need that big of a hook. It's super, super light. But the one thing that you have to remember is, so maybe you have parts that if you hang one part or two parts in a nest, this hook is good enough. But then you hang 20, by then the hook at the very, very top of the nest, the one that you hung first, has the weight of all 20 pieces, not just one piece. So the one at the very top might start to do this. The rest of them might be fine. So that means that you need a bigger hook, basically. So at Kaiser, we usually don't go as sophisticated as like, okay, on the first hook you use this, and then hang 3 parts and then go to a smaller diameter, and then hang a couple more parts and go to even smaller diameter. Normally, if we hang a nest of 20 parts, let's say, and we see that this is bending out, then we're just like, okay, you need to rehang that, just grab a bigger diameter hook. So we just take them down, we get rid of these hooks, then we go like 1 step up. Or if it was like really, really bending, we go 2 steps up. We just hang the whole nest with it.